Okay, here we are. This is Module 5, and we're evaluating muscular strength, muscular power, and muscular endurance. And for this presentation, I want to kind of divert a little bit away from that and shine a light towards how to evaluate performance in a dynamic environment. You know, you're working with your people, and many times, we have coaches who want to drive their athletes over a 12-week mesocycle towards a test out day. But in that time, as your clients are working out or your athletes are working out, they might add a little bit of weight here, do an extra rep there, and there's ways to quantify those workloads to help you evaluate performance. So let's take a look here. We'll try not to get too far into the weeds. I'll try to keep this pretty straightforward. So we have to look at volume load. And the first thing is when you look at like training programs, you look at 3 sets of 10, 2 sets of 10, 5 sets of 6, 6 sets of 5, and you start to do the math on that, and you go, okay, well, 3 sets of 10 is 30, 5 sets of 6 is 30, 6 sets of 5 is 30 reps. So it's how many reps are done in a particular workout. And you can look at that graphically over time and look at like sets of 10, sets of 8, sets of 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and sets of 1 over a macro cycle or even a mesocycle if you want to get a little bit more narrow focused. But the big thing is you look at volume load, and volume load is a further step in that quantification process. And this is actually found on page 203. You have the number of reps, the number of sets, and then the amount of weight that's being moved around. Now, I as a practitioner, I'll look at like percentage load as opposed to volume load, and I'll look at or volume percentage as opposed to volume load, excuse me, and I'll look at like the volume times the actual repetition percent that I'm using, and I'll use that as a quantifier to try to come up with what is a hard workout and easy workout, but it's a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation today. So the big thing is you're looking at how much work is being done with the volume load, right? You're looking at how many reps, how many sets, and how much weight is being moved. So let's take a look at an example. So a person does 3 sets of 10 with 70 pounds. And with the 3 sets of 10 at 70 pounds, well, we know they've done 30 repetitions total. They moved 70 pounds with each rep. So you can go 30 times 70 to give you 2,100. And what happens is when you're in a coached environment and a trainer environment, you can start to incentivize your people to, instead of doing 70, do 75. Maybe instead of 10, if you get an extra rep or two, that will also flow through and increase the amount of weight moved. So your volume load will go up. So you look at in terms of workload, instead of doing 2,100 pounds, if they do 75 pounds, 3 sets of 10, it's still the same volume, 30 repetitions, but at 75, it extrapolates out to another 150 pounds of work being done because it's 5 pounds times 30 reps, right? Well, when you evaluate this and really break it down, you start to look at it and go, okay, you can do the mental gymnastics, if you will, and do the math back and forth. So you can calculate out a 1 rep max from the work that's being done. And so you quantify out, great, we've done 2,100 pounds of work, we've done that. But really, what is my 1 rep max based off of 3 sets of 10 at 70? Now, the book itself, and I'll point this out on another slide, the book itself uses a little different percentage range. I've used 0.03 per rep almost the entirety of my career, and it served me well for a quick and dirty method to be able to just come up with when I'm with a client and we do a bench press and we get done with 155 pounds. They go, well, what is my max based off of that? I can very quickly do the math backwards and let them know their max is 205 or 215, whatever it may be. Now with this, you can go online, you can go to a Wikipedia search and just do Wikipedia how to calculate 1 rep max, and you'll get a ton of different results, and one of them is the Epley formula, and that'll be in that article, and it's pretty easy to source, so I'm not going to belabor that here. But the big thing is when you have 3 sets of 10, it's roughly 70% of a 1 rep max. The book will list this as 75% of a 1 rep max, but I tend to calculate out at 70%. I'm going to flow through with that the entire presentation. Well, we know that their calculated max is going to be about 100 pounds, give or take. And when a person had a floating max or training max of 200 pounds, what does that look like? And I interchange those all the time with my clients, floating max and calculated max, because the max itself will float a little bit from workout to workout to workout, especially if we're working with your athletes. Do they have midterms? How was their nutrition? Were they out the night before? Did they get good sleep? What's going on at home? And that will cause that max to kind of float a little bit up and down. But you try to, through the calculation of reps and sets and the updating of your programs, you take the information feedback from the athlete and program it back in to calculate out a new floating 1 rep max, which you'll see this in a different presentation. So you have your athlete, their bench press is 200 pounds. You want to do 3 sets of 10 at 70%. Their workout weight's going to be 140 pounds. Well, 140 pounds at 3 sets of 10 will give you 4,200 pounds. Now, the book likes to use 75% for 3 sets of 10. I find it to be a little bit aggressive. I'm more of like 68 to 73 for 1 rep max. But nonetheless, in the example we're doing here, your volume load for this would be 4,200 pounds moved in the course of a workout. But it brings the question, like, is that a hard workout? Is it easy? Is it light? Very light? What type of workout is it? And it's dictated by several different things that include the amount of weight that's used, how many repetitions were used, how much rest is in between each one, was it paired with another exercise, what was the workout done earlier in the week compared to what you're doing now, how much time do they have off, where are they in what particular microcycle, what particular mesocycle, in season, off season, or preseason. So there's a couple different things that you really have to take into account when you look at programming. And the book comes up with this, and they use RPE and the Omni Resistance Exercise Scale, and this is found on page 406. And this is, if we were to overlay a chart here where intensity goes up, and when intensity goes up, the repetitions will go down. Makes sense, right? You can't do 10 reps at 100%, otherwise it wouldn't be 100%. But anywhere on that plot, we can find a point where it's going to be hard, or it's going to be somewhat easy. And I would contest that 3 sets of 10 done at like 70-ish%, that's going to be pretty hard, especially if you do like 1 minute to a minute and a half of rest in between each one. So to that end, I think you're kind of looking at this and using this as a tool, but it's not the end-all be-all tool. But it's definitely something to help you in terms of what is hard and what is easy. Now, we go ahead and look at this a little bit further. You have to take some considerations when you look at quantifying workloads and also being able to evaluate workloads and maxes for your people. What's their chronological age, their training age, total body mass, lean muscle mass, activities that they normally do, where are they in season, off season, preseason, do they have any injuries? And then you look at this and you go, okay, when we're looking at testing out and maxing out, for some people it makes sense to not do a 1 rep max and to do a calculated 1 rep max. And when you look at these two side by side, you can see the one on the left, he was a senior, the one on the right, he was a freshman. And these were 2 of my athletes I had when I was coaching. He had multiple years experience working out, and he was older, so chronological and training age were higher. His total body mass was 170 versus 320, and then his body fat was extremely low versus his, which is higher. And you look at this and you go, the bench press is over 2 times body weight, the squat is over 3.5 times body weight, and the power clean is 1.8 times body weight. This guy was very explosive and very twitchy, the best way I can describe it. Where as a younger athlete, this person had a little different somatotype, to say the least. And when you look at it, he doesn't have any one of his exercises of the big 3 that were over a 1-to-1 weight to body weight ratio. So clearly these are 2 different athletes who have 2 different types of experience and ability. Now, what happens if we drop them into the same training program? Well, this is what happens. The one who is super strong and twitchy, we go ahead and do bench, squat, and power clean. If we were to quantify that out, this would be the total volume load, and this would be the total amount for those 3 exercises at 3 sets of 10. Whereas for the other one, this would be the total load, and this would be the total load for the 3 exercises. And you compare those 2, you go, wow, this guy is almost twice as much as this one. I mean, you're talking a sizable difference between those two. And it is noticeable also when you look at the body weight for each one and you look at the amount of weight that's being moved per pound of body weight for each one. It's very obvious to see if you put them both in the 3 sets of 10, this person would be pushing pound for pound way more weight than this person. So again, I have to ask, when you look at this, given one person is doing more work pound for pound, and you look at this, which one is going to be more challenging? Now, a side note here, you look at power clean. Power clean is a little more power oriented, so you have a central nervous system and peripheral nervous system component you have to address. But long story short, when you start talking workloads in doing high rep ranges, you probably wouldn't do sets of 10 on power clean, like 6s, maybe 7 reps would be the tops for power clean. But for somebody like Sully, it's a lot of technique oriented stuff. And it's also a lot of repetitions to build a base from which he can now work. We need the tendons stronger, we need the ligaments stronger, we need the muscles stronger, so we can now branch off and get into different rep and set combinations to make it more explosive. Whereas this athlete, Antoine was already there. So we had to give consideration in terms of how much training and load parameters were placed on the system so we didn't blow him out of the water. So we get back to this. Where would they fall on the scale? Probably both would say and state it's an 8. It's a hard workout, right? But I would say Antoine's on a pound for pound basis was probably a little bit higher than Sully. So you can make your argument either way when you look at this, and you can use a scale to help you out. It's not an exact science. I'll just put it that way. So let's go ahead and take this one last step here. When you look at this and you go, what is very light? What is very heavy? And you try to quantify this in terms of undulating your rep and set combinations towards taking somebody towards a test out. And so when you look at programming, and then the ultimate goal many times with programming is to drive people towards a test out goal, you have to give consideration to the person. And you look at the difference between the two body types that we just talked about with who were my athletes who were within a couple of years of each other. There was a noticeable difference between those two. And also, you have to look at it and go, within the context of training and training experience, they may have been working out, but what was the quality of their workouts? If they were in a high school program without a strength coach and they were just doing bicep curls, yes, of course they were working out, but it was not specific to what we're trying to accomplish in that setting. So when you look at the different testing that we're going to get into for muscle strength, power, and endurance, there's a specificity component that they have to address that really isn't addressed in the book, but you have to look at it in terms of, is this specific for my client? Is this specific for the sport? Is this specific for the athlete that I'm working with? And it could be the right test out in terms of bench press. It could be the right exercise in terms of being like the sport of football, like both of those athletes were. But when you look at those two athletes, you can clearly see one of them, Sully, probably wasn't in a position to do a heavy 1 rep max, whereas Antoine, given how explosive and poppy he was, he's somebody that could handle that 1 rep max. So just kind of think that through when you're working with your people and working with your clients. It has a specificity in terms of the programming, but also the specificity in terms of the goal, but also a specificity in terms of the person. All right, thank you so much.